Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is episode 17, if I'm not mistaken. There is myself, Elvish Raptor, Lotus, and Skull right now. We might have Ruthless later. We'll just have to wait and see.
To be fair, he
Today,
said he would just be late. There is no if we have him. He will be here.
okay, he'll be late.
There you
He's
go.
Raptor.
Fuck off. Anyways, we're
Oh,
talking
thanks.
about world building.
Oh my gosh, Skull, you're a little bitch. I hope you know that. Figured I'd just get that out there.
Hey, if he wants to use the same stupid insults over and over again.
That's when you use what I showed you. First of all, you little shit. That way you can really lay into him.
Anyways, world building.
Fair enough.
Who would like to get started?
Raptor, first of all, that's my line. Second of all, I don't know. You just go sit in the corner and let me and Skull take care of this over here.
Yeah, this is your guys' thing. I'm just along for the ride.
As usual.
Fuck off.
You're just a supporting character. I'm sorry.
No, you're not. Don't fucking lie.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, when have you ever been?
Blame the 30 hours of not sleep.
I mean, to be fair, you've always been like this. When it comes to Raptor, at least, because it's Raptor.
Okay, fair enough.
But, yes, no, we're going to be talking about world building today, because, writing and fun stuff like that. And also, let's be fair here, world building is quite important when it comes to just enjoying, anything. Because it has to have a good setup. And that can be for anything. It can be for shows, movies, books, video games. Like, the characters and everything are obviously what helps drive it. But
Yeah.
if you don't have a consistent world, then, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
So, is there anything you want to add on top of that right now, Skull, before we really dive into effective world building?
Not really.
Alright, fair enough. Let's start this then. Well, I'd say more from a writing perspective, I care more for characters in terms of the overall thing, but I can't deny how important it is to create a world where one could easily, I would say, suspend belief to where they're not always questioning every little thing. You're still gonna
Yeah.
have people to do that, unfortunately, because that's just how we are. We're always gonna question some things, be like, wait, why didn't they just do this, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you gotta set up a good world. And there are certain genres definitely need good world building. Well, that's almost crucial to what it actually is. However, I won't deny that there are some other genres that don't really need a lot of world building. I would almost argue for a lot of fantasy, all you really need to do for world building is setting up the magic system. And if you want to really go into where the magic comes from, you can do that. However, it's not always important. You don't always have to be told where the magic comes from. It's magic. Accept it.
Yeah.
And yet we still get times where people ask that kind of stuff, and it's like, why? Why bother?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it also is very important to a lot of other stuff. I'd almost say, how would I say it? Dystopians. Dystopians are something that really needs a lot of world building.
Mm-hmm. Why is the world the way that it is? What
Exactly. And you have to make it consistent and make sense with what you're trying to write. Instead of not just bring up a whole lot of questions that just takes you out of the reading. I can think of one example because again, I don't read a lot of dystopian because I'm not really a big fan of the genre. And well, maybe if it's fantasy dystopian, then I might indulge a little bit. But there was one dystopian I read because it sounded interesting on paper. Don't get me wrong, like the concept was interesting. The execution was not the best though.
Oh no.
Yes. So it was a book called Delirium, and it's the first part of a trilogy, mind you. And in essence, it takes place in like a post United States kind of thing where love had been declared a disease and to be the root of all the world's problems. Because love drove people to do crazy things. Which, okay, fair. I can see that. So when people turned 18, they'd have the part of their brain capable of loving killed off. So basically, they were not capable of love. You'd almost wager they shouldn't be able to do any emotion, but it's whatever.
That's kind of fucked.
That's the point of a dystopian. It's supposed to be a fucked up world. Because I mean, it's not supposed to be like all rainbow and sunshine. It's supposed to be really dark and gruesome, and it's got to be something that for the protagonist to fight against, essentially. I mean, just look at Hunger Games and how Katniss didn't initially go to usurp the the whole government and everything. Like, she was just trying to survive. But because of her getting sucked into the system, she was basically pulled into a rebellion. That's ultimately how it kind of works. Like, you go along with the system until your own beliefs are challenged, and then you fight against the system yourself. The only thing here is that the character didn't quite align too well with this, and it felt like her change was very drastic. Not to mention, just...
Oh god.
Mind you, it's a romance first and a dystopian second. I'm saying that now. Because if you go into the book expecting a dystopian, you're going to be disappointed. But if you go in expecting a romance, it's passable. But essentially, the girl, the protagonist, I don't even fucking remember her name. She was getting ready to be matched up with someone after she turned 18 when she had that part of her like brain killed off, essentially. And she was really excited for it, but then she met this boy that really kind of stirred some feelings in her. But she didn't want those feelings because her own mother, in her own viewpoint, her mother chose love over her. And therefore love was bad, because love drove her mother to do crazy things and probably got her mother killed. Well, she slowly starting to fall for the boy, but she's also like pulling back because she doesn't want that. She doesn't want to fall. She doesn't want to do all these things that, love can make you do. Well, that all changes when her best friend, which I argue this story would have worked a lot better with a platonic love than a romantic love, but that's besides the point. Again, more inconsistencies. You have her best friend who's this really rebellious person who manages to get her hands on illegal music and things like that because it's been banned because it makes you feel things and stuff like that. Again, more to the world's like, I can kind of see that. But it starts kind of falling apart when it feels like the protagonist and her love interest, who saves her from a raid party, which, mind you, if you grew up in this society all your life and you knew they performed these kind of things, you shouldn't really be that shocked when you actually see the horrible things. It's like, these things happen. Because before she goes off to rescue her friend from basically a raid, because she's at an illegal party, she sees the neighbor's dog that had been killed by, essentially the police. I wouldn't say police, but like, I don't know what you would call them. But she's kind of thinking about how there's like, it probably had rabies anyway because it wouldn't shut up, and they basically killed it to shut it up. And she was really sad by that. And I'm like,
Yikes.
why? Why does this surprise you? Because that was supposed to be like her turning point when she started realizing that society's not that great. But I'm just like, you've lived in this world all your life. Like, is it really that surprising to you?
Why is this such a...
Yeah, exactly. And then she goes to the party as the raid shows up, so she's trying to get away from being, restrained and everything whatnot. So she's trying to escape. The boy saves her, not even her friend. The boy just comes out of nowhere and saves her. I say out of nowhere, but he was at the party. And then as they're hiding out, he tells her his whole backstory about, wanting to fight for love and everything. And I'm just sitting here like, really? And then to make things worse, like, just in that moment, like, after he explains everything to her, she just kisses him. Or he kisses her, and she's into it. I'm just like, why? You shouldn't want this. Your mother and everything. And we get into more, like, where it feels like these two are able to just openly express their affections for each other, which shouldn't line up with what the world is establishing, because it feels like it's very strict. That if you show any ounce of attention to anyone, you're going to be carted off immediately. But it feels like they go on like this for quite a while.
Jeez.
Yeah. And then to make things worse is her best friend, the one that's the rebel, the one you'd expect to be rebelling against all this, is just going to go along and have that part of her brain killed off just because she can't always be a rebel. She's got to fall into line with society. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Seriously?
Yeah.
Fuck.
So that completely contradicts her whole belief on like being against
And
the system.
character. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, you got character assassination in the book. You've got inconsistent world building. And it's just a lot of things that don't make sense, too, because, like, it takes place in, I think, Portland, Maine, which was the biggest draw for me, because I'm from Maine. And I don't see a lot of stories take place in Maine unless it's, like, a Stephen King book. Which, that's a whole other thing. But regardless, like, they're trying to escape in the very end because they're gonna kill off the part of her brain before she turns 18. You're not supposed to do that because it can cause problems later in life. Or just complications right off the bat.
Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah, right? And so, like, he comes in on a fucking motorcycle. So, like, they're having this big chase at the end. I know, of course he does. They have this big chase, and they're heading up towards what is essentially Canada.
Oh boy.
Yes. And there's, like, this fence dividing them to where, like, it was, like, it was an electric fence, but it was turned off. But they turned it back on to keep them from leaving. I'm like, but why? Just let them go. Who fucking cares?
With all due respect, the border between Canada and the US is literally just a fence.
Even then, like, in some places. Let's say in the part of Maine I grew up in, there was no fence. You could literally walk into Canada. It's kind of great. But now they have drones up there, so it doesn't really matter. You can't really do that stuff anymore. Yeah, no illegally crossing the border anymore. I've done that a few times. I'm poor. Well, I was off-roading. What can you expect? And the trails up there swerve into Canada. It's like you can't always help whenever you enter another country's border. You should fix the trails up there. That's all I gotta say. But regardless, like, they try to stop him, and she manages to get away, but he gets captured, and I'm just like, and it leaves on that cliffhanger, and I'm just like, so let me get this straight. So instead of just letting her go off into Canada, which is essentially like the wilds to them, like anyone who goes in there never comes back, they're trying to drag her back into the society she doesn't want to be part of, that she just might cause more problems for in the future. Just because you think.
Well, clearly we have to euthanize her, is what their thought process is.
That or, like, they throw them into, like, this insane asylum, which I don't understand the reason for that either. Because apparently it was, those who the procedure didn't work on, they were thrown in basically an insane asylum, but I'm like, why don't you just kill them? Because if you really don't want these type of people to, like, be in the world, then you should just, like, kill them off, right? Am I not the only one who thinks that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, 'cause, like, that always bothered me, because it got to this whole point where, I think it's, like, halfway through, the love interest saw, like, I think this, dog tag or something around her, like a necklace of some sort. He's like, "Where'd you get that?" He's like, "Oh, it's my mother's." And he's just like, "I've seen it before. Your mother's alive." And I'm like, "Are you fucking with me?"
Oh my
Jeez.
god.
Fucking.
So like, it just doesn't make any sense throughout it because like love is a disease. You want to kill off the disease. They have a way to do that. But if you resist it, they just throw you in an insane asylum instead of just killing you off. On top of that, the mother apparently fucking escaped the asylum anyway. So it's like,
Jeez.
what?
How did this book make it through publication?
It was probably ordered by the publication. Let's be fair.
God. That's so fucking bad.
And like the thing is, like I said, it's a romance first and a dystopian
Jesus.
second. And because of that, it ignores the rules it kind of sets up. Like it's good up until the party happens, in which the raid happens. Everything feels consistent, everything feels in line, the characters follow the rules of the world, and nothing really seems out of place. But it's not until the whole like white knight he saved her kind of thing, shared my tragic backstory, now she loves me kind of thing.
Shocker.
I know, right? I mean, another big shocker. This is made for teenagers, right? There's been a few other romance dystopians, and I truly do despise the genre of that. But it's also killed my love for dystopians. But also, I'm just not a fan of dystopians in general. So
Never really been. I like the concept, but I've never found a lot of dystopian novels that have like kept attention. The only one that I did read and actually kept my attention all the way through was a book we were reading in high school called The Last Canadian, which so with this, imagine COVID only affected Canada and the US essentially and killed off most of the population.
okay,
Oh, okay.
So protagonist has this virus, right? They're carrying it or whatever, and it didn't kill them like it should have.
So are they
For a
immune
good
or
no, like they've got it, they're just not affected by it. They're
so
basically
technically
like,
they are
so
immune, but
they're
they're
immune?
also a carrier.
yeah, sort of. So a majority of the book just kind of follows this like this guy going through life, surviving, traveling, whatever. Eventually, he ends up finding out that the entire virus was created by the fucking Russian government.
Okay.
With how close Alaska and the edge of Russia are, this guy's like, okay, new plan. I'm not just gonna survive anymore. I'm gonna go kill everybody else.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So the last quarter of the book is just insane. You've got military and everything after him. And he does technically succeed, but he doesn't make it to. He doesn't get to live to see what he accomplished. They fucking nuke him.
Wow.
Like, straight up, just like. It was. Like, China, Japan, and Russia all fucking bombed this guy, right? Sure, they killed off a lot of the remaining population as a result, but. They killed him.
Nani?
Yeah. You know, I'm not gonna lie, that kind of reminds me of, obviously not quite as in depth, but it kind of reminds me of the Left 4 Dead games, where there's this like mysterious illness that infects everyone, and the only ones that are technically the survivors are the four main people because they're kind of like theorized to be carriers, but they're immune.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what that kind of reminds me of, except for zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. I mean, you can say the same thing with The Last of Us as well.
That's fair.
Also, I'm not sure about Last of Us. There's also like really weird variants in Left 4 Dead games. Not really sure
Well,
what's up with that.
Well, people theorize again, like a lot of it's theory because a lot of it wasn't confirmed or not. but people have theorized that it's based on certain diseases people might have had that might have twisted with the infection and mutated and making them special infected.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, that's like theories and things like that. People like building onto the world that they don't really know too much more about, but things that might make sense.
I mean, sometimes it's fun to have world building that's open to interpretation, though.
But not too open, because then you get people who like constantly try to poke holes, and then other people join in on that, and then it just gets to be a headache. It's probably one of the more harder, if I had to say, like, it's probably one of the more harder things to do is to create open kind of world building. Or just like very basic world building. Things where like you just say like you're in a fantasy setting.
Yeah.
The most generic kind of fantasy, but it has very modern kind of like ideals. That's probably like very little world building. You don't have to do much there. If a fantasy setting, you have modern day characters just in the fantasy setting. That's all your world building is right there. That's not bad. It really isn't, because it's something that's simple. It's easy to understand, and it's just a fun little escape. But one thing I would argue sometimes takes a little bit of explaining. Again, it's like if you have any magic systems, power systems, corrupt governments, things like that. Because you kind of have to explain how things got to this point. Again, like I said,
Yeah.
dystopian is a big one where you definitely need that, because you need to explain how the world got to the way it was at some point or another. Whether
Yeah.
it be like right off the bat with quick and easy exposition, or slowly going into it over time.
Yeah.
And that's why I say the same with kind of like power systems, magic systems. You kind of need to explain where like not really where your magic comes from. Like again, you can do that if it's important to the world building and to the story itself. But if it's not important, then you don't really need to add it. But you do need to explain how it works. And in that case, you need to explain how the magic works with the world.
Yeah.
Because I know I didn't I didn't watch too much of this, but I know they did like a He-Man remake or something on Netflix. I don't remember what it's called.
I thought it was Shiro, wasn't it?
Not She-Ra. There's
Yeah.
there's a He-Man one.
Really?
Yes, there is. I think it's like in the first episode that literally He-Man sacrifices himself because Skeletor, whatever his name is, gets a hold of like the very like essence of magic itself. Then again, He-Man sacrifices both him and Skeletor and pretty much leaves the world and the fate of his friends in his place because he's not there anymore.
With
And you
him?
get this like really quick exposition how they need to restore magic to the world, otherwise everything will die because the world can't exist without magic. Which is going to conflict with the main protagonist, which I don't remember her name, but because she blames magic for taking away her best friend, essentially. And that it was
Right.
all magic's fault, and she doesn't want any part of it. So again, like you get that clash. You get very simple world building, and then you get like something that clashes with the protagonist. Which it's wacky shenanigans.
Oh boy.
Probably also wager something else that doesn't really need any other world building is when you do like basic kind of modern day kind of stuff. Because you're essentially building on an existing world kind of thing. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah.
I think that's what makes romance, especially more modern romances, like if they take place in a modern setting, like probably the easiest. It makes it so you can just focus on the characters themselves, which is nice.
Yeah.
I'd say even if you were to do like a fantasy or sci-fi one, you could just like briefly explain the world, and just then focus all of your effort onto the characters. Like, there's definitely some genres you really don't need to worry about world building because that's not the main focus.
Yeah.
Like sci-fi, I'd say you would, not in the same sense of like time and how things got to the way things are, but just like planets and the universe and technology and things like that. Just like explaining that kind of stuff, because that is kind of crucial to sci-fi.
Yeah.
At least in my experience, I don't read a lot of sci-fi because I'd rather not dive into panic attacks because that's not fun. Not in the slightest.
No.
But I never say sci-fi, fantasy, give or take. I feel like if you're doing it in a more modern setting, you kind of do have to first explain that it's in a modern world and explain how there's still magic in the world, because when most people think of fantasy, they're going to immediately assume it's medieval. I know when I was initially writing my old manuscript, because it was going to be a fantasy book,
Mm-hmm.
I had people who were reading it, and when I told them fantasy without telling them anything else, they immediately assumed it was going to be like medieval fantasy. But when they started reading it and started seeing like technology from our world and things like that, they got really confused. They're like, "Wait a minute, I thought this was a fantasy." I'm like, "It is. It's a modern fantasy. It's an urban fantasy." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And then they just go about their day. Like, even if you do, because like I quickly showed it was a kind of like a modern fantasy, but even then, like, it's that kind of thing you do have to show right off the bat. Otherwise, people are like, "Wait, but I thought this." It's like, no, you're right, but you've also got this going on.
Well, yes, but technically no.
Yeah, exactly. I
Like
don't
that,
know about you. Like, what was that, Rithus?
like that meme
Yes, exactly.
of the pirate.
yes. We're just talking about world building here,
Fashionably late.
as always.
Yes,
Hey, if you're fashionably late, you get the best entrances. Is that not true?
exactly.
That's why it never pays off to be fashionably early. It pays off to be fashionably late, because then everyone's looking at you.
Yes.
Unless you don't want everyone looking at you, then you might as well just arrive early.
Nah,
But,
I'm the fucking weirdo.
yeah, I think we're well aware of that, Ruthless. Don't you worry.
What?
What?
All
Sorry,
right.
spaced out.
That's normal. It's okay. Don't worry. Oh my goodness.
Steve, what are you doing?
But we've
Plotting
talked
to
to.
make you suffer, clearly.
Oh dear lord. Alright, so Skull, we've talked a fair amount of like what kind of genres we feel need world building. Would you like to maybe share some of your thoughts on building up an actual world for any stories or anything?
I've gotta say, depending on the type of world or story you're going for, research can be really helpful in building your world.
I'd say research is crucial no matter what genre you're gonna write in, because oh boy. Obviously if you're gonna have something in the modern world, you're gonna have a lot more research put into your work because you're basing it off something that is real and tangible. Is that the right word? I don't know.
Eh.
Yeah, it's whatever at this point. Kill me later for it. But regardless, it's something that is real and has a foundation, is something that you can pull from. Whereas if you have like things like fantasy and sci-fi, even dystopian, like anything that might require a little more creativity and imagination, you still need to do some amount of research to give ideas and build upon, even though like may not just always be real and whatnot. Because even I'd say I do a lot more research now than I did back then, because obviously back then I had more of a fantasy going on. So a lot of the research I did was for a lot more smaller stuff. Sometimes I'd look into other magic systems, like get some ideas what I could do with magic and things like that, as well as, researching monsters and things like that to add into my world. However, now with the two works I do work on, I do a lot of research into cities, because one of them is based in Paris, so I have to do a lot of research into that, because I'm not European, I'm not French, I'm not a Parisian. I am American. So I know nothing of that culture and the city or anything like that. So I do have to do a lot of research into that for the world I'm building and working on. The other one is a little bit easier because it's based on a combination of what is New York City and Chicago, which I live near Chicago, so it's a little bit easier for me to pull from that. But it's almost the same thing. I'd say the big difference is New York is a concrete jungle, whereas Chicago actually has, some greenery in it, which is nice.
And also New York has going off of pure memory of like the I think the one time I was like by there for like, maybe like a few minutes,
Hmm.
literally. It's more spacious, and there's always something that is like you never find out in New York. Like there's always gonna be something there that you never been there. You know?
Right. Which I can't speak much for Chicago because, I may not live in the area, and usually when I do visit Chicago, it's typically in the very heart of Chicago where you're gonna find all the attractions, the Field Museum, the State Aquarium, the Trump Tower, the Bean, all that stuff. That's usually in the area of Chicago I'm in. So I don't usually see the outskirts of the city. I don't see the suburbs and all the other little districts that make up Chicago. I don't get to see a lot of that. But Dandy helps me out with that because he basically lives on the south side of Chicago. Not really, but close enough. You kind of understand. If you have a big kind of I don't know what the official term for it is, but if you have a not really a city, but almost a words. I don't know what it's called,
English.
but yeah, English. But Chicago is basically not just one city, but many different cities all together. The same way New York is not just one city; it's
Yeah.
a bunch of districts and smaller cities in one.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with Chicago, and it's some things I do need to remember. And I can't really speak of parishes like that because I don't know. I don't live there. I've never lived there, and I don't know. I can only speak for what it's like in over here in America, but it is important parts of my research though is to see what I can pull from, what I can build on, what I can maybe squeak by, and things like that.
Would it be Metropolis, what you're thinking of? Maybe?
I think so. It's very close. I can't remember what Dandy told me exactly, but that word is very close. Yeah, I think so. I think Metropolis might be best term. It sounds right.
So I
That's
guess
all
we'll
I
go
gotta
with
say.
that.
Yeah, we go with that 'cause it sounds right. So I'm like, you know what? We go with that then.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
Valid.
What else would you say besides research?
Um, I mean, with world building and writing, you kind of need to have a handful of solid settings, places.
And that also depends on just what kind of story you're writing too, because you don't always need to focus on the settings in certain genres. Because I know I write more slice of life. I do write some superhero stuff, but I don't find the settings all too important throughout the entire writing, just more to set up the scene. But if you're going to be writing things like sci-fi, probably fantasy too, dystopian, those things that would require that kind of descriptions and things like that, that I can definitely see needing to have those settings made in advance.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. But if you again, also if you're making things grounded in modern day, you can also easily just say they're here and people would immediately know what you're talking about, and that's all you need to do for your setup.
I
It's
mean,
it just kind of depends.
yeah. I mean, I've given a basic rundown on what my project is and why I'm sort of going what I'm going with for my world building point.
Yes. I don't remember too well what it was. And I think it was just you and me for that episode, so I don't think they know
No,
that much.
Ruthless was there, and I think Raptor was too.
I don't think Raptor was.
For which episode?
It was episode 5 where we were talking about writing. No, yeah,
do
you
you
weren't
think I
there,
wrote-
Raptor. I think
Honestly,
it
I
was
don't
just me and
recall.
Skull. Yeah, because it was just me and Skull for the longest time, and then Ruthless came in like halfway through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, no, Raptor wasn't there at all.
Maybe it was during my Peru trip.
It might have been.
Yeah. I remember there was an episode like that, and then I just don't remember anything else.
That's fair.
To be fair, my memory, sometimes, when it's something that isn't that majorly important, I just probably forget.
I feel that.
Ooh.
That's how I mostly operate, so I know that feeling all too well. So why don't you share some of the points of your world building, Skull?
God, let me.
I think it's easier just to get yours out of the way first before I go into my tangent. Let's be fair there. Oh, I didn't really touch my soda at all. Whoopsie! Hey, it's not fly yet. Let's go.
No, I don't need that short story. Thank you, Google Docs, for opening to that when I don't need it.
Isn't Google Docs so helpful?
Yes, it's beautiful.
I love it.
I hate myself a little bit because I knew this episode was gonna happen, but I just didn't have all my outline of like the final line, like the little bit of the outlines I had with One World of Mine.
I mean,
You can always share what you've got if you wanted.
I didn't have any time to prep either.
You know, I
That was
believe
on my
it.
sleep schedule.
Oh my gosh.
To be
That's-
fair, yeah.
No, go ahead, Ruthless. I wasn't gonna say anything.
I kind of using the world, so I kind of split it into two versions. One, it would be like in D&D setting, and then the other would be like it's a setting that I kind of been like slowly been trying to do work on it. I just have been like dealing with so much shit.
Oh, fun.
So yeah. Yeah. What was Skull was gonna say?
Skull's working on grabbing his like world building notes.
I've got them up. I'm just realizing some of the stuff is really, really bare bones right now. But
You said that before that was really bare bones too, though.
I haven't done a lot of work though on it. I've been lazy.
Well, why don't you just share what you have, like where you're starting, like share your skeleton essentially, to give like some people an idea where it can start. Because from there we can move into my stuff, which is it's a chore. I think we can both agree on that. Mine's gonna just take a lot more explaining.
Yeah.
So why don't you go ahead, Ruthless?
I just realized mine actually have a decent amount of shit that have to be explained.
Yeah, there you go. See. All right, so we start with the skeleton. Let's hear it, Skull.
So the Forgottens is essentially set in a fictional city on, I want to say, the American East Coast.
Okay.
Hopefully, it's gonna be like a modern fantasy set in a city that's a mix of definitely a bunch of bigger cities with a bunch of different cultural inspirations here and there.
Okay. What else you got?
I mean, I've got some detailed location stuff, but
By the way, where you've got it at is it's going to be like an American East Coast city, modern fantasy with like a bunch of like multicultural inspiration.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and that's a good place to start. You've got the skeleton for you to flesh out, essentially. That's always a good place to start. Like, what you have is a very good place to start, Skull. Oh, excuse me. Ruthless, why don't we hear your stuff?
Oh lord.
Here we go,
Oh.
let's hear it.
So I'm gonna get into like the most I'll say the most simplistic way of describing the world.
Okay.
Imagine a post-apocalyptic setting that has elements of fantasy, elements of high magic, elements of high technology and sci-fi, horror.
So, is it like a science fantasy kind of thing?
Kind of like a science fantasy, but imagine a very wacky blend that kind of does sometimes go into the cosmic horror.
Okay. So it's like Star Wars meets Lovecraft.
Not completely, but
But you
because
kind of get where I'm coming from, right?
it has more D&D vibes. I definitely will say it has more D&D vibes.
Okay.
So, and this is kind of somewhat taking a little bit of inspiration from few arts. So, the world had went through a gigantic. This world was imagine the world was very largely controlled by the Roman Empire, and then there was like a country that was by itself, and it was like trying to just survive and just not being invaded. And then there was a bunch of other people.
Podcast. Okay. I'm on mute right now.
And to make it just simple,
or something.
the world had ended because of the war, or kind of that, kind of a war, kind of not, out of like some mysterious aspect that came along and was like that what they risen from the whole madness and chaos of the aspect madness
Okay.
to make a new world, and a world that is reflect upon madness.
All right.
And it would be a dystopia setting, and where the world would be at is most of the people are right now, like it would be 20 years ahead, and where this would start and how the story of time would start would be one of the more peaceful places, full of unique, powered people that have unique powers. How is unknown, and it is like a small village, and they start. The story would start around there, and that's kind of how this first part that I have all written down.
Okay. It definitely does sound like a D&D campaign. I'm not gonna lie.
It does have like
It
D&D
does.
campaign vibes, but like the thing is kind of more like I kind of had like an idea of like a character to have like just a character roughly, just to continue, just to run with as the character, but I was unsure, admittedly.
Okay.
The main character, I was considering having it being related to having like an ancestor related to the madness, like who became madness, but I was unsure on doing it.
I mean, it's almost typical for that kind of stuff with protagonists. I feel like
Yeah.
usually to have them directly related to whatever the problem was, or closely related at the very least.
Yeah.
I mean, like, pulling from Legendborn for an example, and again, spoilers for anyone who watches this, how the world is built up that the magic that is used by the knights, well, the knights I say in quotes, the descendants of Arthur and his knights is blood magic because they're constantly taking from their ancestors and not giving it back like they should be with real magic, which is what the protagonist is later being taught she should be doing. But what she's doing is actual blood magic, and something happened in her ancestry that, caused that, because that shouldn't have happened. And then when she does find out, it's because she's related to King Arthur. Again, like, where that protagonist ends up being a descendant of or closely related to the big one.
Yeah.
So
I
again,
kind of thought it would be too cliche. I wasn't sure if I
it
go
depends
through.
on how you go about it, because execution is a big thing. Because when I was reading it, I was not expecting what I read. Because when I initially read it, I thought the love interest was indeed going to be the descendant of King Arthur, and I thought she might be like Guinevere or Morgan Le Fay. But that wasn't the case at all, and I'm just like, well, shit. So again, it's just execution.
Yeah.
Cause like, you can still make it work very well. It just matters how you go about it, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. I kind of had like a rough idea. Like again, like I don't know like where to go. Like the part that made it a little bit hard for me to like go and like made me go with it is like where I'm gonna like what's the end point of it, or what's the rough idea of where I want it to go at the end of the day with that character.
That's definitely a good place to think about. Usually, so I'm I'm not someone who tends to plan out their writings that often. I usually start with a vague outline of where I want it to start and where I want it to roughly end. However, I do find, and this is why I can't really do manuscripts and books and things like that, because my ideas are constantly changing, and one thing that I think is a good idea is no longer a good idea, and I change it. So usually it is very, in my opinion, it's very good to have a vague idea where you want like your story and your world to start and where you want it to end. That way, everything in between you can kind of just almost make up as you go. But it is also good to have something of an outline so you can hit your bullet points and then fill in between the bullet points and maybe make some changes along the way.
Okay.
Is there anything else you had for that, Ruthless?
There's other shit, but I'd much rather not bog so much shit of my own shit with this.
I don't know. Then you're gonna hear me go on and on, Earthless. So I mean, now's your chance.
Some of it will have very high context. I think some people in a other server will probably get the references that like some of them is like I kind of integrated some of the inside jokes that we had in another server. Like it's kind of more of like it has a bunch of inside jokes.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
I got
That's actually where I actually kind of been able. That's only thing I've been able to work. And mind you, I did like kind of gave like the bare minimum explanation of it.
Okay.
So,
Well then. And would you care to move into my world building then? And that whole process. Oh boy. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Might as well get it
All
over
right.
with.
Which one do you want me to start with, Vanguard or Miraculous?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that doesn't answer. Which one first? Which one are you more interested to hear about first?
Honestly, whichever is fine. I'm excited for both.
Okay, because regardless, I'm gonna share both. But I just want to know which one you want me to start with.
How about the order you said it in? Vanguard, then Miraculous.
Fair enough, since no one else is gonna give an answer. But anyway, Vanguard was an interesting piece. So when it came to building up the world and the story, I knew I wanted it to be a kind of superhero thing. It was actually my first dive into the superhero genre, as well as, I guess what you could say is drama, or well, slice of life essentially. Drama is essentially slice of life kind of content, more or less. Obviously, drama is a very broad genre, along with everything else. It's not just one big thing; it's a bunch of smaller things. Regardless, it takes place in our modern world and has a lot of our technology. There's no, there is going to be some kind of like sci-fi elements to it in terms of the technology, but that will come a little bit later with a certain character because of how she develops the world. But the main focus of the world and the story is on two individuals, Arthur and Sparrow, and the world that they see and experience and how different they are, but they are still the same world essentially. It's basically a matter of perspective, and it's why they are both protagonists. This is both their stories, this is both their journeys, and you see it from their eyes. So they live in the same city, which again, it's a combination of New York and Chicago, being this metropolis, essentially. And you have both that have superpowers. And in this world, it is not uncommon for people to have superpowers. However, it's kind of like almost, oh, that's the best way of it. Almost like someone being like gay or anything like that, where it's not uncommon, but it's not completely common either. It's kind of like almost a middle ground. Like there's just enough of it that it's not, wow, I can't believe that kind of thing. But you still have people like that, obviously, because the supernatural is always going to attract people and fantasies and all those likes. So you're still going to have those type of people, but it's kind of that thing where you just kind of bat an eye at and just move about your day for the most part. I mean, you can still have to be a little surprised by certain things regardless. But in this world, what you'll see more is people with more common powers. And what I mean by common powers is something, along the lines of like flight, super strength, invincibility, and things like that. Even like being able to manipulate the elements, not create elements, but manipulate what's already existing. You'll see stuff like that. And there is something of a hierarchy, I say in quotes, to what these powers are. Like you'll see people with like flight and super strength more towards the bottom of this like social ladder essentially, and people that can manipulate the elements a little bit higher. But then you have people above that which have more rarer powers like technomancers. People like this are more low valued. However, the powers you won't see are the more dangerous ones. Mind control, psychic powers, time travel, future sight, creation, destruction. You won't see any of that kind of stuff. And it won't really be revealed until much later. Well, I say much later, but I'm currently working on the finer details of this because I just had the idea for it about a few months ago on how I could further develop the world itself. But taking this into consideration, Sparrow is someone with a very common power, which is flight. And for her world, she is working on climbing up the ladder in the association of being a hero, because that's all she's ever wanted to be. She is someone who is completely selfless, has done nothing but give herself to everyone. Like, she has never actually existed as a person. She has only existed as something to help, a tool, essentially. That's basically all she is.
Sounds like Deku, but less the Naruto vibes.
Yeah. And you have from Sparrow, she comes from a smaller town, so being in this metropolis is culture shock to her. So that's another thing to her character, onto her world, is experiencing all these different types of people and culture while also trying to work on her job. Well, at least to the best of her abilities. But you see, she has a very naive view of the world. Everything to her is more black and white, good or bad kind of thing. But she slowly does start to develop more of a gray zone and starts to question some things. However, then you have Arthur, who has always lived in the city, and he has powers that are considered illegal, that are dangerous, because he can control people's minds through song, essentially. And it's something he has hidden all his life, but has used in the past to give himself a better life. Not really better life, but essentially give himself a loving family, because his parents were always fighting, his mother abused him, and that kind of thing. And that's when his powers came out, is when he stopped his mother from striking him. And he used his powers for as long as he could to make them the loving parents he wanted. But that ended when the song ended for his father. And when that happened, his father called him a monster and left. A few years later, the same thing happened to his mother. But his mother stayed just a little bit longer, but eventually did the same thing and abandoned him as well. So you see Arthur trying to find something of healing, because he's been traumatized. He's scarred mentally and emotionally. But it's also through him overindulging in song, which he enjoys, that he discovers the darker underbelly of the association and that hero power society. He's always known that what he had as powers was unusual and something that he probably should have hidden, but it's not until he meets a certain individual that he learns the true darker side of it all. And that's where it will further develop in his story, where he sees the darkness, but Sparrow only sees the good, more or less. Then you have everyone in between who helps further both of them. It's where the Vanguard collections does come in, because you have Shakila. Shakila is going to be a big thing for me when it comes to world building because of her powers. She is a technomancer to everyone else. She is at the top of the food chain because of what her powers are. She doesn't need multiple powers like some people do. She has some of the best powers. She has the best powers, essentially. But she also has the most dangerous powers, too. It's technomancer in our modern world. This is someone that if she really wanted to, she could easily just take over the world. And this is something she knows all too well. And as I go through with the Vanguard collections, because it's mostly going to focus on her, building up what she knows, how she sees the world, how she sees only corruption and darkness and secrets, and her longing to expose it, essentially. And you see how if people have these illegal powers, if they can be controlled, they will be collared, and their powers, what's the word I'm looking for? Lessened, reduced, muted, almost silenced, but not quite. So it's like Arthur, for example, if he was to be collared with one of these, he'd go from being able to control people's minds to merely make suggestions that could fail. Be like Hans, essentially. But then you have other people who like the mysterious individual I have no name for. The psychic, essentially, who I will be introducing hopefully shortly. If someone like him were to be discovered, they wouldn't bother collaring him, they would kill him. Because that's how the association has operated. Anyone who has had powers that are considered illegal or dangerous, if you are young enough, you are killed before you actually become a person. But if you are a person, it is weighed your benefit to society, what you can offer, and if you're worth keeping alive, essentially. And if you won't become dangerous down the line, kind of thing. So, that's Vanguard for you. That's the world I built Vanguard on. What do you guys think of that?
Interesting.
Ruthless? He's quiet. Any questions before I move on to Miraculous?
No.
None whatsoever?
Nothing coherent at least.
A coherent, oh jeez. Ruthless, what about you? Well, I'm gonna take the silence as a no for now until he does speak. Anyway,
So
there you are.
my brain cells is half alive.
I noticed. But what did you think of the whole Vanguard world?
Interesting.
Any questions?
Honestly, I kind of just only have like maybe one question. Is like, actually, I'm not even sure if I have a question.
Well, what's on your mind? Do you have any comments then, if not a question?
Trying to remember. My brain is like half alive, and I've just been so tired.
Oh my gosh, you and Skull, both of you need sleep.
Well, I have sleep. It's just like I've just been exhausted from all this shit today.
Fair enough.
I have no excuse as to why I didn't play.
Yeah, we know. We're all too well aware, don't you worry, sweetheart. Alright, well, let's see if we get something of a thought process, not really thought process, but like, let's see if we trigger something with this. Miraculous! For those who are not familiar with the dumpster fire that I unfortunately am, Miraculous Ladybug is a French-Japanese Korean show about a 14-year-old and another 14-year-old, pair of 14-year-olds essentially, who save Paris from supervillains created by Hawkmoth, and these two heroes are known as Ladybug and Cat Noir. It was a passable show in its first season that slowly has devolved into nothing more than a kid show. I don't care what the writers and director or whoever says, it went from a show for teenagers, well, preteens more than anything, to a show more for children. And I have the Comic-Con experience to back me up on that. Because I can tell you right now, every time I go to Comic-Con as Cat Noir, I get more children coming up being like, I like you! And I'm just like, son of a bitch! Or their parents coming up be like, my kid loves the show that you're dressed up as. I'm like, why? Oh my gosh.
Oh shit.
Yes, that should tell you anything. You still had more adults dressed as like, Cat Noir and more Ladybug than you. There's no Cat Noirs. I was the only Cat Noir.
Damn.
And this sea of fucking Ladybugs.
So you were probably the center of attention for a lot of kids then.
Oh my gosh. Every time they'd see me, like, their parents would stop by and they'd be like, look, it's Cat Noir! And they'd come up and be like, my kid loves the show. And I'm like, yeah!
Holy shit, that is awesome.
Yeah. There'd be a few times... What was that?
Say it's Rapper, you might say it's awesome now, but you wait until you get swarmed by a group of little goblins.
Well, there were a few times at Comic-Con where I was just walking slowly behind Dandy, and I heard one girl, she was kind of talking to her friends. I could tell they were talking to me, because, obviously, when someone's talking to about you, you're gonna, you start zoning in on them without realizing it. I just hear them talking, and then, I assume they looked at me, and they're like, is that Cat Noir? And I turned around and looked at them. And they kind of stared at me, and I'm like, hi. Oh yeah, no, it was something. And I had some people take some pictures of me as Cat Noir. It was fun, and I found a ladybug to take pictures with. So yeah, it was fun. But no, yeah. So the show again, as I clearly just stated, it's made more for kids nowadays. It's very simple plot and watered down characters compared to what it was originally. I'd say season 1 and 2 were probably some of the better seasons, but then 3 and 4 just kind of, yeah. Now, I haven't seen season 5 yet, so I'm not counting that because it's just spoilers at this point.
Admittedly, I am refusing to watch more of that.
Well, Ruthless, to be fair, I've gone too far down the rabbit hole, and I kind of need to see just to fuel my my own creation, so. But
Yeah.
essentially, my miraculous AU is exactly just that. It's an alternate universe that is also me just rewriting the show made for not for kids or teens, but for adults. It does still feature teenagers as the characters, but 16-year-olds, 16, 17-year-olds, which is where I tend to write, because in Vanguard it's the same way. Sparrow and a few others are 16, and you have Arthur along with a few other ones that are 17. Hi. So that's generally where I tend to write my characters when it's teenagers. It's about 16 and 17. And that's where I have aged up Marinette and all her friends to be. They're not 14 to whatever age the show wants to pretend they are. They're all in high school, not in middle school. Because on the wiki, it says that they are in a middle school. At least, like, what is it? Correct me if I'm wrong, Skull, because my French is not the greatest. But it's a collage? Like,
I don't fucking know. I learned
you know?
Canadian.
Oh my gosh! Is it really that different?
Yes, they go by a completely different system.
Ah, for
For
fuck's
us?
sake.
For us, our school system is very similar in how we go by grades and stuff as the US. Just
Well, yeah,
yeah.
it's the same thing. It's just the word is what I'm trying to say. But essentially, it is the French word for middle school. It starts with a C. It's COLLEGE, and the first E I think is accented.
Hold on. Let me get up my dictionary.
'Cause I think the CA is high school. I think that's how it's said. I could be wrong because it's been fucking years since I've spoken French. So yeah.
Hold on. Middle school is an école intermédiaire, which is like
That's completely different than what they use for middle school. Then yeah. So yeah, I guess it is really different, isn't it? For
yeah.
So yeah, no. But no, yeah, regardless, like it says that they are in a middle school, even though the synopsis says high school. So like contradictory right there. Nonetheless,
Okay, maternelle is preschool, école primaire, elementary.
I'll let you continue doing that.
Is it college?
That's it.
Fuck?
Yes,
What the
that's it.
fuck?
Yes.
Le lycée? What
Yes.
the fuck?
Yes.
L'université, that one's okay. Un écolier. Le maître? What? What is this list? France, what the fuck?
This is great. Welcome to French. France French.
They're weird.
I know. It's great though. I think we've broken the Canadian French over there.
Listen, the maple syrup baguettes is definitely something much preferable.
That's
Okay,
great.
first off, maple syrup is disgusting. Second, why are we talking about wands?
Just hit
Wands?
in the back.
What? do
I
you
don't know
think?
what that is, but can
Well, a baguette or a bâtonnet is a little stick, which is what you'd say a wand is in French, which is why I was confused.
Oh, I was saying baguette as like the food.
yeah.
Well, you,
I think baguette like the loaf of bread.
Yeah.
then you say a
the
French baguette. You say
Okay,
a French
look,
baguette.
we're fucking
Listen,
ignorant
I'm American.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
I'm so American that I cannot even understand anything other than American.
You understand me relatively well.
Still, we're Americans.
Well, I'm speak American is all over the planet.
Oh,
You know.
for fuck's sake. Look, I understand French a little bit better than Canadian French, okay? Because that's what I was taught in school, alright? And even then, I'm still ignorant American, so when I think baguette, I think whatever that loaf of bread is.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, you're not wrong, but my thought process being as it is, and you
As
got
30
me
hours
speaking
sleep
French
deprived.
yeah.
You're... Hey, but at least I'm still right in terms of what the words are, alright? I just introduced you to some new words. Alright. Let me get back to this. Ruthless, you might appreciate the world, like the changes I've made, so. But as just a quick rundown to explain the differences in the show for what is canon, the Ladybug and Cat Noir and all their friends get their powers from Kwamis. The Kwamis are governed by a guardian, which was Master Fu up until season 3 when it became Marinette. All that fun stuff. And that's pretty much what it is. Is that really all for the world building? Is that really it for the show? Oh fuck, that's kind of sad.
What do you mean, like, you're already
Pitiful.
done?
I think that's what it is for the show. Yeah, it's like literally like they get their powers from Kwamis. Kwamis inhabit jewels, and they're overseen by guardians,
Oh, fuck.
and
Well,
that's about it.
sounds
And
about
then
right.
Hawkmoth gets his hands on the butterfly, transforms people in Paris into monsters to draw out the ladybug and cat, and they just stop the monsters every week, essentially.
I'd still like to understand why people getting possessed by butterflies makes them evil.
I don't know. It's something to do with negative emotions.
Yeah, that's just a mind fuck right there.
Yes. So I think you can see what I had to work with, and there's a lot of changes to be made. So again, first of all, the show is made for kids, so therefore it's going to be devoid of a lot of darker topics. That does not mean it does not touch upon them lightly. However, as someone like me, and probably a few other in a very similar age demographic, probably between 18 and maladjusted adult, we obviously want to see more because there is potential in the show for more, but it does not really dive into it because it is devolved into a kid show. And I don't mean that in a good way. So
Honestly, I would say a trash kids show because it's like poisonous. Like has some areas where it's just like, okay, I don't want to have my kids. If I was a parent, I would not want my kid to see this shit. Like see this type of trash.
no, I do have to agree there. Let me quickly grab something just to make it a little easier on myself so I can remember certain things. Okay.
I mean, to be fair, with the first season of Miraculous, my little sister was watching the show for a bit, and my parents said she couldn't watch it anymore because the villains were too whiny.
Really, that's it?
That's so hilariously stupid.
Yeah, I kind of have to
I
agree.
mean-
Like, they're villains.
I mean, to be
Villains
fair,
in
my
a
sister
children's
was like,
cartoon, that is.
but here's the thing, my little sister was like 4 or 5 at the time, and they kind of wanted to get her watching more educational shows instead of just, you know, seeing characters be overly whiny and then copying that, which is what she was doing for quite a
Okay,
while.
well, in that case, I can understand,
I
but like
guess
the
that's fair
educational
enough.
stuff is hilarious, though. But so again, it's like we all know how the show is, at least here amongst the group. Okay, yes. Silence. So, again, the first change came with making everyone older teens. 16, going on 17 here soon with some of them. But again, 16, 17 is the age demographic I am working with these characters. That's not necessarily the appeal of the audience I'm going for, but it's in that age range. Making it more new adult is the technical term for what this would be. So the first big change was removing Master Fu and the Guardians. There are no Guardians in my version of Miraculous. The Kwamis govern themselves because Kwamis are meant to be the manifestations of abstract concepts. Therefore, these things are like literal gods.
Wow,
More or
they
less.
actually finally feel like gods. Man, I'm
Yes.
so surprised.
So yeah, no, they're supposed to be like the manifestation of abstract ideas and concepts, but they don't feel like that in the show. They just kind of feel like here's your key to power, essentially. So in my version, I did take away the Guardians, so the Kwamis do govern themselves and manage their own jewels. They pick their holders, no one else does that for them. They can have influence on each other, but at the end of the day, they make their own choices for good or for bad. And it can be for good or for bad. And the Kwamis altogether are not just made for good or evil, but they can have nefarious purposes or benevolent purposes. It just depends. And holy fuck, let me just tell you, some of these changes are massive. So I'm just going to run down a quick thing here and just share with you what the canon concept for some of these are meant to be and what I changed it to be. So the only two that didn't change of this entire list is Ladybug and the Black Cat. They are still creation and destruction because that's the main draw of the show. And in general, the Ladybug of creation and the Black Cat of destruction. Even though I'd argue there's better choices for those, but that's neither here nor there. Those are the only two I really couldn't change, and I didn't really want to change either. Their powers pretty much stayed the same for Cat Noir. Ladybug's Lucky Charm has been reworked to be an actual Lucky Charm that when she uses it, she gets 5 minutes of good luck. So nothing bad can come her way, she gets nothing but the best of luck. Her creation power is one of her lesser powers, unless she uses it in conjunction with Cat Noir's destruction powers, in which case they can conjure miracles, essentially. Which, I'll get into that a little more later, too. The first change of the Kwamis was Butterfly. In the show, it's the Kwami of transmission. Do you guys know what transmission is?
Yeah.
Or after doesn't? What about you two half asleep people?
I have
Okay.
2 guesses.
Well, transmission means communication.
I
So
see.
the butterfly is the Kwami of communication.
Okay, so that kind of transmission.
Yes. I changed the transformation, 1, to fit the powers a lot better, and 2, butterflies are the symbol of transformation. For good or for worse. The peacock was probably one of the most egregious ones. It was the Kwami of emotions. I don't understand how or where they got that from, but I changed it to the Kwami of beauty because peacocks are the most beautiful birds, one of the most beautiful birds alive. Mainly the males, mind you, because the males are the ones with all the beautiful colors and things like that. And technically the Kwami is a male too, so. The turtle stayed the same. It is still protection. The fox went from illusion, basically being what its powers were, to deception. Because in our culture, foxes are usually the deceptive forces. And all that fun stuff. The bee went from subjugation because, again, I can see that for wasps, yellow jackets, things like that. However, pollen is based off a honeybee, and honeybees don't sting. They don't bite. They don't do anything like that. They're very passive creatures. They will not hurt you. So instead, I went with devotion for the bee. The snake went from intuition to health. Because the snake is a symbol of health. Because, like, Raptor, you've seen, like, for a lot of hospitals, how they have the stick with the two snakes intertwined with the wings, right? The caduceus.
Yeah.
Like, you've seen it for, like, at least, like, the stick with the two snakes intertwined around it, right? They're kind of twirling around it. Or have you never really noticed?
I don't think I ever noticed.
Okay, well, snakes are a big part of medicine, and it is actually a huge symbol of medicine on top of that. Also because their venom can also be used as antidotes for that, for those purposes. So I changed it up to that. And also because I thought it'd be fun to have, like, a healer amongst the group. The mouse went from multiplication, which I get why they picked multiplication, because rodents can breed quickly.
They fuck like rabbits.
Which, when you think about it, don't you think rabbits should have been multiplication in that case, since most people usually, like, point to rabbits when it comes to that kind of stuff and those kind of jokes? But they didn't. I made the mouse perception because they are very perceptive little creatures. The dragon, I'm not quite sure why it was perfection in the show, but I changed it to nature because most Eastern dragons are guardians of nature. They are benevolent forces. And also typically they're more nature themed. Like, I think most Chinese dragons breathe water versus the Western dragons, which breathe fire. Which, fun fact, it's actually the Western dragons that are the evil, the evil, malevolent dragons. The ones that are, the really bad ones. Yes, it's only the Western dragons. Because Eastern dragons, like, obviously Eastern is kind of like a, Eastern dragons are more benevolent. They are forces of good. They are guardians of nature and things like that. Again, like, there's a big difference where you have the Eastern dragons that can usually breathe, like, water or something along those lines, and you have Western dragons that breathe fire.
Okay,
Obviously, that's
interesting.
Fun fact for you. This is where we get. So, like, again, like, we both point out how rabbits would probably be better for multiplication in the show. It's actually evolution that they are in the show.
Really? Why?
So, I saw the inspiration almost the moment I saw the Bunny Miraculous, but it's time travel, essentially. And when I saw the clock and the whole bunny theme, I thought immediately of the Alice in Wonderland, the rabbit. I'm late, I'm also very late. That guy, the rabbit. Are you familiar with Alice in Wonderland?
No.
Okay. Well, in the beginning of the Disney's movie, Disney's first animated version, Alice is, I believe, she's kind of like dozing off at a tree, and then she sees a rabbit dressed in like royal attire kind of thing, and he has a pocket watch, and he's looking at it, and he's like, "Oh, I'm late. I'm also very late," and he runs off to a rabbit hole where he dives down into it. So that's where I saw some inspiration for it because of time and rabbit. I don't know why it's a big thing, but that's where I saw the inspiration from.
I mean, maybe it could be like the kind of like a tortoise and the hare. The hare is like really fast.
Yeah,
when I think of a rabbit and a stopwatch, I think of Alice in Wonderland right away.
That's what I just said too.
I just got back.
Yeah, no, that's literally what I just told him too, Skull. Because the moment I saw Bunnix with the pocket watch, I'm like, Alice in Wonderland. That's exactly what that is. And the fact that when she goes into her time thing, uses her time travel power, she enters a burrow. Very similar to the rabbit did with Alice in Wonderland. He entered the little rabbit hole, the burrow. But I changed mine to connection because rabbits are very, very social creatures. It's actually suggested that if you do get a pet rabbit, you should get 2 of them. If you can't dedicate and devote yourself to loving the creature, because they need a lot of attention or they will become depressed. They need interaction to be happy.
Rabbits, rat, chinchillas.
It's like you'd be surprised how much like interaction they actually need.
Yeah.
Like they love attention. It may not seem like it at times, but they love it. They absolutely need it. So that's why I changed mine to connection to communication and that kind of thing, because that's what rabbits are about.
Honestly,
The
I
monkey.
think it would be. Is it bad that I honestly kind of want a rabbit now because of what you said?
No. They're very cuddly creatures. They're very nice. It does take some warming up too, but the moment here is the best thing about a rabbit. Once they love you, they will love you forever. They will always trust you unless you break that trust. Because rabbits do not forget. They will always remember. So if you hurt a rabbit, they'll never forget that.
Ooh.
But they're also very slow to trust because they are prey creatures. So it could take anywhere between a few months to years to earn a rabbit's trust. But once you have its trust and love, it will love you unconditionally. And it is the best thing ever. I will say that now. As someone who owns a rabbit and the rabbit loves them back, it's great.
So just out of curiosity, by chance, would you happen to know compatibility like between a rabbit and a cat?
As long as you introduce them when they're young enough, they should grow to, coexist. Because it's same with any kind of animal. Like they can coexist, but you have to introduce them slowly. Because remember, rabbits are prey creatures, so you do have to be careful because they don't do too well around other predators. So you kind of have to slowly show them to each other and slowly develop that trust. You do want to be careful with like female rabbits because female rabbits are mean. You think it'd be the males? No, it is the females. The does are mean. They are very territorial. So if you get a rabbit, I definitely suggest a buck because they're much nicer and it's easier to fix a buck than it is a doe. And yes, that's a technical term for the male and female rabbits. The doe is the female, the buck is the male.
Okay, because I was wondering why you were talking about deer for a sec.
Yeah, no, like it was a little confusing for me at first, but no, yeah, you use the same terminology for deer as you would for rabbits in terms of their genders.
Huh, weird.
Yeah, I know. That's just how it is. But carry on, flashlight. Thank you. The monkey didn't really change too much. It was like derision, which is humor and things like that. Which mine is diversion, which is almost similar but not quite. The pig changed quite a bit. It was jubilation or joy in the show. Mine is so. This was actually kind of hard choosing a meaning for the pig because the pig has very negative symbolism in a lot of things, just because of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I went with ignorance, naivete for its symbolism, for what it is in mine. The rooster was a fun one. I need to look up what pretension means because I can't remember off the top of my head what it means. So give me 1 second. Hold up.
When I think rooster, I think obnoxious as buck.
Oh, well. Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about. So pretension is a claim or assertion of a claim to something or the use of something to impress. Ostentatious, essentially. So, fancy feathers almost kind of thing.
Oh.
But let me tell you something. Roosters are awful, nasty, mean creatures. Absolutely mean creatures.
In the sense that they're territorial, or
No, they are nasty creatures. Like, holy fuck. So, one of my old bosses, she is a farm girl. She has a farm. She has horses and all those kind of animals and whatnot. So, she had roosters. And these things are always looking for a fight. All the time. There was one time she was going to take care of the animals, and this rooster, the same rooster, because this was the meanest rooster she ever came across, he was getting ready to attack her, and he charged at her. She knew he was coming, so she turned and punched him out of the air. because he leapt ready to scratch her.
So basically, they're little fuckers.
They are little fuckers. When my uncle had hens and roosters, he had to keep the roosters separate from the hens because the roosters can kill the hens.
Holy shit!
Yes. These are nasty, territorial little fuckers, and they will kill without a moment's notice.
Now,
I mean,
say
that's
worse than territorial. Like,
oh yeah, they're awful. I mean, why else do you think like rooster fights, cockfights? That's why that's such a big thing. Is because roosters are nasty, mean little. Yeah, I know it's funny. Roosters are yes. Roosters are mean, nasty little fuckers. They are almost like the embodiment of hatred.
yeah.
And that's what I made mine. Mine is animosity, which is hatred. Essentially, it's contempt. Ox is still the same. Perseverance and determination is very similar. They're actually synonyms kind of each other. Now this one's funny. So you're American, Raptor, so you should understand the connotations of this.
Fuck
But
yeah.
it's not a good thing though. So we know as Americans, the bald eagle for our country represents freedom, correct?
Yep.
Okay, well in the show, they made a bald eagle Kwami and have that be the Kwami of freedom. The only downside is it's supposed to go into something called the Native American Miracle Box.
Oh.
You see already, don't you?
Yeah.
Yes. So suffice to say, I changed that real quick to make the horse the Kwami of freedom instead of teleportation, which is basically just calling it by its powers. I think the three last ones for the show is Tiger went from exaltation to valor. Goat was passion in the show, went to revelry, which is not quite the same thing, but almost in the same ballpark. And the dog, well, I just changed the name from adoration to love, but it's basically the same thing. But then I added a bunch of other newer ones, essentially, to kind of like add to the story, I guess is the best way to put it. But that was the first change, was changing all the Kwamis and their powers, making it so they have a lesser and a greater power, as well as having a miraculous. And this works differently because for most of them, they need to have their pair to use their miraculous. There are some that don't need a pair to use a miraculous because they are solo. They don't have a pair. But this kind of falls into the show's concept of yin and yang, my bad, where you got to have two sides that balance each other out. But for the most part, I try to follow what the show has already in terms of characters and how they're built into the world. But I had to change how the Kwamis worked with the world because I didn't want it where they were governed by humans, because that doesn't make any sense. Because if you're going to have these creatures that are essentially gods in their own right be governed by something as lesser as humans, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So I changed it to where they govern themselves because that's basically what they should be doing. They are godlike creatures because they came into creation when anyone once thought of these concepts. Which also brings in another question as into how where'd the phone go? There's the phone. So if it's supposed to be abstract concepts, why would teleportation be a abstract concept? Things like that. I can kind of understand multiplication, I guess. But some of these I can kind of understand why they would be abstract concepts, but then you have ones like teleportation, I'm like, how's that an abstract concept?
Yeah.
Just, things that don't make sense. And then I did add on this is probably something that didn't need to be added, but I thought it was fun regardless, where I added in how the Kwamis got their jewels. Care to hear this one, Ruthless?
Yeah.
Okay, so I started out where a quick little explanation from Tiki where they didn't always have the jewels, that when they were brought into creation, well, when they were all essentially born, when they were once thought of, they didn't have the jewels with them. The jewels came later. How they were captured by an alien civilization and bound to the jewels, essentially. And then they were trapped by that same civilization so they could use the jewels and the Kwamis for their powers. The only way that the Kwamis could come out once they were trapped is if someone put on the jewels. It's also why they quickly learned to keep the black cat put away, because the black cat could destroy everything. And the only way they got free was because of the black cat. The black cat got free and destroyed everything. Destroyed the planet, essentially. So, yeah. Something small like that, but it adds a little bit more to what they are. And to show that they are old creatures. They are basically, again, gods in their own right. So it's just like a matter of like building. And changing the powers too, because holy fuck. I think you and I talked about this, Ruthless, like how the powers didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it really didn't.
And like that's important for your world, like especially if you're gonna have superheroes. Like, come on. If you're going to have superheroes, they have to have cool powers. That makes sense.
Yeah. That's the part that made me really in pain. Thinking about it now, I found a lot of the action so painful to watch. It's just like, why I'm watching this.
It's like a one and done kind of thing. Like once they use their powers, that's it.
Yeah.
It's not like they're building on, more to it. Because like look at Superman. Sure, like it's kind of like weird. I mean, he's an alien though, so it makes sense for him. How like under his sun he wouldn't have any powers, but then he comes to our our galaxy, and under our sun, he would have all these powers. Like to us, that makes sense.
Yeah, even though I will admit, Superman is a different case. Like, I think he's a lot better as a slice. Like, he's a lot better as a slice of life character. I will definitely say that up front.
Well, it does have a lot of powers that does make him a bit overpowered at times.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind overpowered if you. I honestly don't mind if it's overpowered if it's like a good written character.
Not like Marinette, where she gets everything.
Yeah, fuck, she can go fuck herself in the show.
I agree. I mean, I'm not really at least like push back on that because I feel like the action is the only good thing about the Miraculous show. But the slice of life is not the good part, which is kind of sad because you kind of need both when it comes to superhero stuff.
Yeah, you really do.
What did I come back to?
You missed quite a bit. We're kind of like talking about like superhero world building at this point, I suppose, because it's more like me and Real just kind of like agreeing on things at this point. Because okay.
I do disagree on the action aspect, though. I will have to contest the action is kind of boring.
Okay, well that's fair. But like in terms of like superhero world building, though, I think we can both agree that slice of life and action is kind of needed in both of them.
Yeah.
Because I'd have to say, like, I just want to push back one moment. Because, like, so the one, I grew up more with DC. DC is more nostalgic for me than Marvel, but there's also another reason because DC takes more time, in my opinion, to flesh out their worlds and characters.
True.
I mean, Marvel has their big movies and things like that, and that's cool. And they do have, like, Spider-Man. Like, Spider-Man's a big one they like to make TV shows of and reboot every single time. But that's all you really get is Spider-Man. You don't really see any others with TV shows. But DC does take that time. You get like the Harley Quinn show, Young Justice, the Batman, the Animated Adventures, or Batman Beyond. You get so much more. Or even Justice League. Like you get more with those worlds that you get to see and explore and build upon. Not just the characters, but the worlds they're in as well. I think that's what makes DC a lot more memorable in that term than Marvel. Because Marvel, again, like they have these really flashy and fun movies that really do draw you in. And again, they do build upon the world. Like that's what the MCU did. It built upon a world. But it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure, like, to some degree you would agree. I don't know what your relationship is with DC and Marvel, like which one do you prefer more? But
I'm a DC guy. I'm more a
Okay.
DC guy. Admittedly, I'm a little bit biased because I have more comic book nostalgia with DC, and also I have a bias because of Spider-Man, and that is a whole new tangent. Also, DC kind of reminds me of like one of the reasons why I like Faerun and some of the Forgotten Realms Wolf.
okay. But no, like, yeah, so I think we both agree, like, if you want like make really good superhero content, just like add in both because you can't always have action, but you can't just have slice of life. Like if you're gonna build a superhero world, make it to where when it makes sense for their powers, to like it can kind of fit in a modern world because like most superhero stories you see take place in the modern world. Otherwise, it's considered like magic. It might fall into fantasy sometimes, depending on how you write it. Just kind of depends, I
Yeah.
guess.
Cough, cough, noir.
Oh hush. But no, yeah. So I think we both agree there on that one. Again, that's probably why it makes Miraculous so painful to watch because it can't really succeed on either of those unless it's made directly for little kids, which it is. So that fun stuff. But you missed out on quite a bit there, Skull. But no, kind of like going back to the AU a little bit. I know I went into a little with Raptor more than you guys, but just kind of like explaining the differences in what the show has built upon and then what I kind of changed. And a big part of it was also how the powers worked. So again, like with superhero or magic or anything like that, you need to build a good system. And it needs to make sense and be fun. Because you can have
Inconsistent.
like a magic system or power system, like it needs to be it doesn't always have to be good, but it needs to like make sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you can't really say one system is better than the other because like it's all subjective. It's all bound to change because there's no right or wrong way. I take that back. There are some wrong ways to write a power system. Taking that back right now. However, there is no actual right way because there's so many different variants and they all can work in their worlds. That's the thing. But there are indeed wrong ways to do it.
You really sure? Really sure? After all, Miraculous did it so well.
My gosh. Okay, look. So I can agree Miraculous didn't do his powers too well because it just wanted to do very simplistic kind of powers. But the thing is, with superheroes, they're not always going to have the simplest of powers, and usually the ones with the simpler powers aren't. I don't know. And to me, aren't really that remembered too well. Like even though Batman, like say Batman for example, doesn't have any powers because again he's powerless. He's just a guy that's rich and has a lot of free time
And very smart.
and very smart. That's true. He is very smart. But
Hell, if anything, that is his fucking power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His fucking wealth and smart.
It's pretty much the wealth, let's be fair.
And has too much free time on his hands.
Yeah, there you go, see? we all know the story of Batman. But no, like you can make things interesting. Like Batman is an interesting character for so many different reasons. And even though he doesn't have any powers, he is technically a superhero. Again,
Yeah.
it's his wealth and technology, but he's technically a superhero.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I will admit, there's some heroes that are like one example that I kind of will say that make an example of like how people don't know where to go with is Flash. Like the comics, they barely know where to go with Flash after his whole if you're like a Flash fan, I think if someone understands the Flash, I can kind of see my point. But I like he is one of the examples. Like he has a very simple power, but it's actually a really unique character with personality wise. But
Well, I mean, and it also kind of falls into like those kind of powers where like you'd see them everywhere too, kind of thing.
yeah,
But
even though not insane like his.
well, it's the same way with like what I'm doing with Sparrow. Like Sparrow has a very basic set of powers. Like first she starts off with flight, and later she will develop super strength because she will get both of her parents' powers. But it's very simple powers in the grand scheme of it. But again, like what makes her interesting is one, the world, and two, who she is.
Yeah.
Because you have this very naive backwater country girl who's basically living in a big ass city surrounded by so many different types of people. Like that is a very real struggle. I think that's also what makes some of the DC characters feel more real as well. It's just because like they feel like genuine people.
Yeah.
Because like not to say Marvel can't and everything, but there's a different feel to Marvel.
Well, I'll definitely say this. Some of the characters sometimes it just makes like some things is like, hey, what? Did I miss something?
Yeah, like Miraculous.
Yeah.
But just to kind of like, I've wanted to do this for a while, so kind of like indulge me a little bit because again, power systems are part of world building, so I do want to like share a little bit of this because I am quite proud of this. I know Skull kind of poked at this a little bit with how does Hawkmoth's powers really work with transformations and negative powers and whatnot. It's supposed to be like I guess it's like a Sailor Moon reference kind of thing. I've never watched Sailor Moon, so I can't really say for sure, but that's what I've heard.
It actually does. Thinking about it now, it's kind of similar. Going off the
That's
memory.
what I thought. But
God, now I cannot stop viewing Miraculous as Sailor Moon.
It more or less is. Because to be fair, it's more of a magic girl show than it is a superhero show. But even then, that's a disgrace for all the other magic girl shows that are actually good.
Yeah.
So, yes, we're gonna throw a lot of shade here, but expect that. But some of the big changes, again, Cat Noir and Ladybug's powers change quite a bit. Like, Ladybug's Lucky Charm actually grants her good luck. Cat Noir's Cataclysm can curse other people with bad luck, things like that. Hawkmoth, or Papillon in mine, because I'm not calling him Hawkmoth, because he is a butterfly, not a moth. His power is to darken people's hearts, to make it where they only focus on the negatives. Or even turn positive things into negative things, because that very much can happen, because too much of a good thing can become a bad thing. And it's through this focus on unhealthy, toxic feelings and behaviors that he can transform people into literal monsters. Which, in my opinion, is far more terrifying, but that's just me. Then you have the Peacock, which in the show really just works to further the Monster of the Week formula with the Senta monsters. But with mine being the Kwame Beauty, it is a dazzler. It can immobilize its foes with beauty. And is also a very dangerous combatant, like actual peacocks are. It's just like small things like that that makes things so much more. Or you have Casey was quick. Celia was quick to point this out with the mouse and the horse, because I was discussing with her the horse powers, and she kind of looked at me and she's like, "You're fucking insane. You know that, right?" I'm like, "Yes, I know." But Ruthless, I think you might agree that this might be pushing it a bit when it comes to the powers, but it still can be used regardless. So perception can bend, and with bend, they can manipulate other people's perceptions. And there's a whole list of things you can do with that, because perception isn't just seeing, hearing, or like tasting. It's things like that, or feeling. It's so much more. It's how we perceive time and things like that. Like she can make it where no one can like visibly perceive her, or she can make it where she can create hallucinations that are so real they actually are real to that person, kind of thing. And the horse gets freedom. And Ruthless, I don't know how familiar you are with this superpower, but essentially it is freedom from all rules of reality.
Okay, that is like really pushing it.
It is really pushing it.
Is really pushing it.
Well, I modified it slightly to its defiance, where it's not necessarily breaking free from the rules of reality, but it is defying some of the rules, like defying gravity, defying some physics, things like that, like being able to like ride along walls and just like avoid impact or weight and mass and things like that. That is defying. Essentially, that is what it is. Because I realize breaking free from reality is a very dangerous thing that you should not give a teenager.
Especially for a rebel, like the rebel.
Yeah, especially for the
Jesus.
rebel.
Jesus,
But that is essentially what the freedom power actually is. Freedom, in terms of like superpowers, is breaking free from reality, breaking free from all the rules. Nothing can hold you down. That is what freedom power really is. Again, I had to modify it so it wasn't too overpowered, because that's kind of the powers that come with a deity, kind of. But then I'm pretty sure there's still some shows that have that kind of stuff, but I did have to modify that because that would have been very dangerous. And again, like, then you get people questioning why don't they do this and that kind of stuff, and I'm just like, shut the fuck up, no one cares. But you get like powers like that, but then you also get lesser powers that aren't really meant to be as grand. Like something as small as seeing the connections between people or being able to communicate telepathically. It's just simple stuff. And that's what makes it fun. Because again, these are Kwamis. They are literal like gods. They should have these kind of powers. Don't you think so, Ruthless?
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah,
more than what the show builds upon.
Yeah, it's definitely way more.
Because like in there, the only Kwamis that actually get like really cool stuff is, in my opinion, Creation and Destruction, which is the Ladybug and the Black Cat. The only other exception to that would probably be the Rooster, because the Rooster in the show can pick any power that he wants to use at that given time.
Yeah, that is weird as shit.
Yeah, it doesn't quite make sense, but that's just me. Because again, roosters.
To be fair, roosters are fucked up creatures.
They're very fucked up creatures. They're nasty little creatures.
I mean,
Again, that's why I made mine animosity. Go ahead, Ruthless.
Yeah, that's why birds universally are fucking evil.
They absolutely are. They absolutely are. Like, birds are awful. Not all birds, but like things like roosters and peacocks and things that are very territorial and aggressive. Very aggressive. Because again, I can't really speak for peacocks, but holy fuck, roosters are mean. I've seen roosters, I've heard stories of them, and oh boy, they are mean. They are nasty little fuckers.
More like hellspawn.
They are hellspawn. You're not wrong there.
Yeah.
They fucking are. But yeah, that's probably as much as I can get into the miraculous AU without divulging into other topics.
Yeah, we already had like plenty of tangents.
It's so easy though, because like you can get into so much more with world building. Because again, like world building is not just obviously the world, but it's also the characters too. And I know we didn't directly say that earlier, but it is a big part of it too, because you can fill your world up with as much cool backstory and lore and things like that. But ultimately, what really makes it good is the characters interacting with it.
Yeah.
I think you guys have said this. I think you, Ruthless, more than anything, about how I run my D&D world. How it doesn't just feel like you guys interacting with the world, but you're interacting with the NPCs as well. How they fill it with more life, essentially.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And that's what you want, because like again, like the world building is the biggest part of it. Like you want to create a world that is fun, that is full of life, and that makes not really necessarily make sense. Well, it has to kind of make sense, obviously, because you have to have a clear set of rules for how it's going to operate. But then what adds more to it is the characters. It's why you still hear us going off about characters, because how they interact with the world is a big thing. And that's what makes it so much better, at least in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, again, like, that's what makes Vanguard a lot more interesting, in my opinion. Like, you can have the world, which is dark in the society that they associate with, but what makes it better is the characters. Because you have Sparrow, who sees a very light and airy version of the association that she so willingly participates in. But then you have Arthur, who only sees the dark underbelly because he's part of it. He's part of that illegal list of superpowers that he can't actually live as himself without fear of either being collared or killed. And then you have Shaquilla, who can participate in that society, but is always tiptoeing. But despite that tiptoeing, she also blatantly breaks the rules. And because of her her powers, they don't want to collar her because of her value to them. She's more valuable to them as she is than as someone to be collared or killed, essentially. It's kind of like that twisted and corrupt way of seeing it. It's like, we'll use you, Sparrow, to do the basic stuff. If Arthur should ever reveal himself, he'd be killed or collared on the spot. But with Shaquilla, she's allowed to break the rules and skirt by punishment because of who she is. And she uses that position of power to further her own darker, ambitions. I don't want to say darker ambitions, but like morally gray. Because she's probably one of the most complicated characters. I have
So
to.
she kind of gives me, just hearing that sentence alone, it kind of gives me vibes of anti-hero vibes.
She is the very definition of an anti-hero, because she would still view herself as a hero of sorts. But she definitely doesn't fall into the moral goodness like what Sparrow would, because Sparrow would be your typical hero character. Arthur would be your typical villain because of just how he goes against society and is an outcast. But you definitely have Shaquilla, who is the very definition of an anti-hero. She will do what she's expected. She will follow the rules to a point. However, she is not blind to the corruption and the dark, like the secrets. She knows how it operates, how it hurts people, and what she wants to do to change it. But it's also acknowledging the cost. Because for what we want most, there's a price that must be paid. And that's going to be the big thing about her character, is she knows what she has to do. She has the gear to do it. It's just taking that step to do it. Does she want to condemn everyone else because of her actions? Or does she want to continue living in a broken society? Kind of thing. It's like, do we want to make change happen? Or do we want to continue blindly living in the reality we do? It's those kind of questions. That's what makes it fun, though. It's like you take like this world that is broken, almost like a dystopian. It's not quite a dystopian, but to the heroes, it's a dystopian. But yeah, so what do you think of all that, Ruthless?
Interesting.
Again, that's what makes it so much fun, because you have the characters interacting with the world. It's like Vanguard for me is so much fun to write and draft and everything because of how these characters are going to interact, how they interact with each other and things like that, and like just their worldviews and everything, and it's great. And Miraculous, I don't have as much of a connection with because Vanguard is my passion project. Vanguard is my baby. It is the one thing I have poured a year into world building and creating the characters just to get where I'm at with it. But that's not to say Miraculous itself is not something I take lightly. Because again, it's something I've put a lot of effort into. I've changed how the Kwame system worked. I've changed how the powers work, how the characters do interact with each other, their entire dynamics and things like that. Like, this is definitely something I've made for adults and not for kids. It is darker, it has trauma, it has death, abuse. It has these things, and it grounds it more in reality, basically. It's why some things like Otherworldly, which I've tried writing, but it just doesn't click that well like Vanguard and Miraculous does. I think mostly because Otherworldly was also meant to be a fantasy romance, but I wasn't really feeling it. I feel more the superhero genre. I say that, but then I can write D&D campaigns, no problem.
I think the thing is like writing a story, like a D&D campaign is more of like you have to get like at least like a skeleton out, and then there you go.
That's true. For anyone who's not interested, but you're gonna hear it anyway. D&D is also another part of world building, and I know for a lot of aspiring DMs or forever DMs or just DMs in general, you have something you can already use. You have the Forgotten Isles. You have all this stuff that D&D has established as lore for a world you don't have to worry really about creating. But if you're someone like me and you create your own worlds, world building is a very important thing because you have to start from scratch when it comes to your own campaigns. You have to build a world, you have to build a setting, you have to build the gods and everything, the laws. Everything falls
Yeah.
on you to create and explain because this isn't something your characters can just look up on a wiki page. It's something you have to completely build from scratch.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, like, you can still take inspiration from existing things. Like in my world, which I will be showing you lot the map here soon because these guys are my D&D group. I am their DM. I will be showing you the map, but a lot of the religions do pull from real life, as in Norse and Greek and things like that. But then you're still going to have things like the custom system I made for the first campaign. You're going to have the primordials still there. And again, like, the primordials are a big part of the theology, like the actual backbone to the adventures. Like, you guys can still worship like the minor gods and whatnot and things like that, but ultimately it is the primordials that hold the true sway. Which is how it goes anyway, because primordials are pretty much at the top of the hierarchy there with theology in D&D. From what I saw, is like lesser gods, major gods, primordials, essentially.
They were like pretty much really close to like just regular deities. The over deities, there's like fucking, and by mind you, they're technically not gods by like D&D, like Forgotten Lore, by Forgotten Realms technicality, going off of pure memory. But they're kind of the power level of a god, though.
They're more than just a god.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is essentially what you get with
I mean,
mine, where they're pretty much as well. They're actually more powerful than just the basic gods because they
Yeah.
are the backbones of the universe. They are the originals.
Yeah.
Kind of like isn't it not the Titans, but like in Greek mythology, how you have like Gaia and
Yeah.
all that stuff, like the very first, and
Yeah.
from them more came.
Yeah, pretty much the Titans.
Well, wasn't the Titans like Kronos and all that?
Yeah.
So like the ones before Kronos and his ilk.
That's
Essentially,
the gods.
no, because it's it's like you have Gaia and then all the original ones. Then you have the Titans and then you have like the gods.
I thought it was Gaia and Kronos.
No, Gaia was the mother of Kronos.
My brain is like, oh yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, it's Greek.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
I'm just like, oh yeah, it's the Greeks. So, yeah, should not be a surprise.
We really want to get into how fucked up that all was, where you can do that in another time.
Yeah. Different place.
That's a different place. Like, mythology's fucked.
Yeah.
But again, it's part of world building.
Yeah.
Again, that's also what makes it a lot of fun. It's not just the world. It's not just building up these systems and rules and environments, things like that. But it's also the characters that do inhabit them.
Yeah.
So
I think that's like the only way. Like, that's the kind of the main reason why people do it. If anyone else kind of make it, like, if I know some people. I know one person that'd be like, "Oh, the system should care." I'm like, I don't know, but I really don't. I don't know. Like, it doesn't. It really doesn't feel like that, and it kind of doesn't feel like that. The system should matter as much more than like the character.
Well, again, that's also you weren't here for it, but you'd actually kind of agree with this. But I'll give you a quick rundown, Ruthless, because this was like right before you joined. I was going into a book called Delirium, which kind of failed a little bit in its world building, and it's not really that good. It's like the first of a trilogy, which don't really think it should have been a trilogy to begin with, but that's neither here nor there. Essentially, main synopsis: it's a dystopian world where love has been declared a disease. When you turned 18, you'd have the part of your brain killed off that's capable of love, so you would never be able to love again. The main character is about to turn 18. She's getting ready to be matched. Falls in love with some random guy, but doesn't want to fall in love because she has a complicated relationship with love. Mommy issues, that kind of stuff. But regardless, she still falls in love with a guy, and they're going to perform the surgery on her before she's 18, which they're not supposed to be doing anyway, because there's complications that can arise. But she's falling in love, so they have to do it anyway. He manages to rescue her from captivity, which is basically just in her house. They work to escape to go over the fence into what is essentially Canada. She escapes, he gets captured, and the book ends there.
Mhm.
And it's
That sounds so much bad. It sounds a little bit bad.
well, it's only bad because it's supposed to be like this really dark dystopian kind of world where everything's very rigid and no love, no individuality, and things like that.
Well,
but
that's not how you do a dystopia, in my opinion. Like, it really does not. Like,
oh no, it gets better. But there's raids though. Like people, like you have those like kind of like officers that check up to make sure you're in line, no loving, no rebellion, no none of that, and like all that kind of stuff. So like, yeah, there's some dystopian elements. What do you mean?
It's dystopian, but like, it's just a bad dystopia that
Yeah,
I
I
don't care for. Like, right, I like when it's executed properly. I like it a lot. Like, there's some fictions I try to remember. I think it was a movie or a comic. I'm trying to remember. That kind of does lean into it, but there's always like a glimmer of hope. And also The Walking Dead. I kind of like the comic version. The TV show I don't care for because, let's face it, they're never gonna fucking settle
No.
and just stay in one place. But the comic, they fixed that completely.
Okay.
And they were able to settleize.
Well, I kind of brought into the bad world building because even though like it clearly sets up rules for how things should operate, it doesn't fully operate in that. Not to mention there's a lot of holes into what it is. Because one, there are people that can resist the surgery, like they can have it done, but it doesn't change anything, which doesn't make any sense. And you would think that they would just kill those people off immediately, but no, they just lock them away in an insane asylum. And then on top of that, when the main couple are trying to escape, they turn on the electric fence to try and stop them. And I'm just sitting here like, wouldn't you want them to leave and potentially die out in the wilds? But no, they don't. They try to stop them. Try to drag them back.
That's kind of stupid.
If they really wanted to put an end to all of this before it happened, they could have just euthanized them.
That's what I'm saying. Like that would have been like that's the most simple like solution, but yet we don't do it because, that's the bad solution. We shouldn't do that, but like isn't that not what the society would do?
But technically speaking, if it's a disease that's bad, wouldn't, by their moral standpoint, killing these people be better for them than having them deal with some form of disease?
That would be the idea, wouldn't it? But no, it's not, unfortunately. Gotta make things complicated.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, keeping them alive is the more unethical thing in that world.
Yeah. But no, so like the characters kind of betray the world, they betray themselves, and the world it kind of gets pushed aside so it can be a romance.
Yeah. That shit kind of makes me just.
That's
bring
why
pain much.
a friend who read it too, she was quick to say how if you go into it looking for a dystopian, you'll be very disappointed. You go in looking for a romance, it's okay.
even a romance, I'm gonna say it's dog shit. I know that is a take.
I think we would agree there. You're good.
Yeah. I still don't care though. I will still say it's shit, no matter what.
I mean, Lotus, wasn't your statement the book was good up until the party?
It was. 'Cause that's when things just didn't really make sense anymore. Because I'm sorry to those who have to listen to this again, but regardless, this is gonna happen. But Ruthless, it's pretty sad. So like you would get like if you live in this kind of society all your life, you're used to the raids and the darkness and all that other stuff, the things that happen. Well, the main turning point for the protagonist is when she realizes they killed the neighbor's dog, just because it wouldn't stop barking. And she feels sad for the poor creature, and then she goes off to save her friend who is at this illegal party. But as she arrives to save her friend, that's when the raid starts. So she's trying to get out of there. The guy she likes finds her because he was at the party, conveniently, saves her, tells her his tragic backstory, and how he's part of the rebellion for love. I think he kisses her, and then they start dating because she falls in love with him.
Jeez.
And then the mother that they established was dead. She later finds out from him that she's still alive, locked away in an insane asylum. But when they go to see her, she busted out, and no one seems to care.
What?
Apparently, she like tunneled her way out.
Why?
Women just dropped off the earth like the guys who broke out of Alcatraz. Straight up.
Yeah, they tried to make the scene so much more impactful, like how I think the mother wrote love all across the walls and then dug out, and it's supposed to be like, oh, she'd do anything for love, and I'm just like, really? Why did you keep her alive? Why didn't you kill her? That was my thought process the entire time. See, that's don't do that. Oh, and then even better, Ruthless. The best friend's the protagonist, the one that was like really rebellious and things like that. You know, what you'd expect to probably go against the system. No, in the end, she folds and does whatever the system wants her to do.
What the fuck?
Yeah,
Okay.
that one I
At that
just flat out face palmed.
Fake anarchist.
Pretty much.
Dishonor on you and the horrible name you bring to anarchy.
Yeah, because like the protagonist is trying to like get her friend to come along with her to like pass the border, but her friend's like, "Yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna stay here and go through with the procedure." And I'm just like, I expected this to be the reverse, but okay. So yeah.
That makes no goddamn sense.
No, it doesn't. Even from a teenage perspective, like no teenager that's rebellious is just gonna go back to the way things are like at that age. Maybe when you're
Exactly.
older, yes, but when you're 16, 17, 18, even into your 20s, you're still hitting that rebellion. Like you don't understand quite yet how things are truly meant to be, and you'll only see like really like or feel. You go off your own feelings and you act on that. So you think you know what is right, but you don't actually. So I don't know. The fact that she would go along with this, saying it's like what she should do, I'm just like, but would a teen actually do that though? Just
Most normal people in that situation would be like, nah, fuck the system.
most teens would, yeah. Like rebellion breeds that kind of stuff. Oh, yeah. No, that's how you don't do world building.
It's also
like-
how you don't do rating tiers.
Yeah. Okay, to be fair, it's not always easy to write teenagers because even when you do what you think may be writing them properly, you'll still have people be like, well, that's not how teens act. And it's like, It's how some teens act. It's like there's a wide array, because I'm going to tell you this right now. When I'm writing Vanguard, because again, like I am writing teenagers, it is hard for me at times to think, is this what teenagers actually do? Because I have teens like Hans, which I know there are teens like him. I fucking know there is, because I've had to deal with teens like him when I was a teenager. And that is the... What's the nicest way to put this? The playboy. The one that will fuck with anyone. Like, I think we've all known a teen like that, right?
Oh boy.
Okay, so
Oh boy.
I
That's all I
never
can say.
knew a dude like that, but I knew a girl like that. Nobody
But,
liked
okay,
her.
so like, it's the same principle though. Like, it's hard for me to remember that there are teens like him, like ones that will go out and go to parties and, you know, actively engage in sex and things like that. Like, it is hard for me to remember that, like, still, like, hey, there are teens actually like this. Like, this isn't just me playing
Yeah.
into a trope.
I mean, it's a trope that's pretty true.
That's the thing. Like, that's kind of like where I'm having the problem. Because, like, when it comes to the writing, the characters, and the world, I'm trying to make it so it's grounded in reality, but not play into tropes too much. Because obviously, when you get a lot of teen stuff, you see a lot of tropes. And I'm trying not to do that so much and have it more where these characters do feel like people you'd actually encounter in high school. Obviously, you have Hans, who is, you know, the pansexual playboy.
Oh boy.
So it really don't matter to him what you are. He's down to fuck. Then you have Shakila, who is the rebel.
Isn't Hans like the Superman duplicate?
No,
Very
he's
much.
not.
Oh, okay.
No, he's
no,
not.
he has does he have invulnerability?
No, that's that's Kalanak. So Hans is the one that can suggest and mesmerize and hypnotize through dance.
Ah, I see.
Yes, essentially the playboy. No, and Kalanak is I would say the jock, really, but he could be one. Just because he's very athletic in those terms. But he's like almost a gentle giant trope. Where he is someone who has incredible super strength, but he also has to learn to be gentle because he is very strong. It's that kind of thing. But like, he's probably one of those that might fall a little more into the tropiness, just because his unique circumstances and his character and whatnot. It's like that one I can admit would probably fall into a trope. But then you have Milo, who I know kids like him exist. Because I've come across a few where it is the older brother. The one that has to be responsible. The one that had to grow up early. Just to watch over everyone. Because in my writings, Milo is the oldest of 7.
Yikes.
Yes.
Yikes.
And the thing is, it's not even all just his family, because he was an only child. His mother got divorced. She remarried. He already had 3 daughters with his previous wife who had died. So he has step siblings. And then on top of that, they had 3 more kids. So he became the oldest of 7. On top of that, they have basically a bunch of animals. I think like 7 or 8 dogs, a few cats, and then a bunch of like rodents.
Oh god.
Yeah,
Yes.
honestly, I don't understand how parents can even sleep with the fact that they put that much pressure on their kid.
I mean, have you heard of the family that had like 15 kids?
Right. It's it's just that kind of thing. After like people will have people naturally want big families, and sometimes the eldest there are. Okay, so I can't say it's more often or not because it depends on the family, but it depends on the dynamic too, because there are some families and parents that will expect the eldest to step up and assume responsibility. There are other families that may not always Yes, I know.
I can't relate to that at all.
Sure you can't.
Yeah.
There are some families that won't always put that responsibility on the eldest, but the eldest will put that on themselves. And then there's those parents that just don't give a fucking damn. Essentially. But Milo falls more into his parents don't expect him to be as mature as he is, but he has taken up that role of being the eldest of 7. He is the oldest. He feels it is his own responsibility to watch over everyone, kind of thing. And it makes him not quite quiet, but he's very. He will stand in the back and he will watch and observe. There's practically nothing that escapes his eye. He always sees what's going on and he can discern very easily what's going on. That's the type of character he is. Just because of what he had to be. To himself, at least. And then Tallulah's just a wayward rebel, I guess you could say. She doesn't really fit into the society, but she doesn't know where she fits in. And it just her rebelling against nothing, essentially. Trying to find her place, which she doesn't even know where that is.
So a lost child.
Essentially, yes. Because her powers, her strand of powers make her unique in terms of her and her mother, because they can manipulate plants. Because similar like poison ivy. But the way that their
The less
bodies
weird
are,
poison ivy.
yes, the much weird less poison ivy. But the way that her body is with this strand of power, like genetic strand, I guess you could say, is that she's almost more plant-like with how, because she's powerful, and she has a closer relationship to nature itself. So whenever the fall and winter months set in, she enters hibernation, like the rest of the nature. So up until spring starts, when the leaves actually start budding again, she sleeps all winter, and for a lot of fall. So as a result, like it caused some problems in her family because her mother experiences the same thing. Once fall really not really fall, like when winter more starts, when like the leaves actually start falling, that's when they hit hibernation. Usually like the end of the end of October, which is like late fall, starting to get some early winter, depending on where you're at. That's when they hit hibernation, but it caused some problems with her parents, where you have the father who ended up cheating on the mother, even though, like, you know, complications. She ends up kicking him to the curb, talking shit about him in front of his daughter, and then refusing to let him near her. The daughter, at least. Even though the daughter knows, like, he's not a bad man. And she tries to get in contact with the father, but because of how the mother is, it's just not allowed.
Yeah, sounds about right.
The mother doesn't have that close of a relationship with the daughter, that there's like major disconnect.
I see. I see.
It's like Tallulah knows what her father did was bad, but at the same time, she doesn't blame him either, because she understands enough. Unlike her mother, so that kind of thing. It's like these are people you would come across in life. They may be more like self-aware than most teenagers would probably be, but they still feel real, right?
Yeah, like this a little bit more self-aware is a little bit like, I will admit, it is a little bit somewhat like, can be like, I can see some people say it's a little bit forced, like can somewhat breaks the realism, but at the same time, there's some teens that are self-aware, so I'll give that leeway.
Right, like
Personally.
there's no, I guess, right way to write teens because there's just such a vast variety of them, and you also have to take into account their backgrounds and things like that. Because again, you have someone like Shaquilla, who is one of the most complex characters I have made to date. Like even in the past, when I was making complicated stories in my manuscripts, none of the characters in that manuscript was as like complex as Shaquilla. And I think that's why I like her so much, because like, there's so much to her, and that's what makes it fun. Like, she is trauma, but at the same time, she wears it well. And she, like, that's probably the character that's most self-aware, but the thing is, with kids like her, they would be that self-aware.
Yeah.
And that's what makes them terrifying. Always remember that. The self-aware ones are the terrifying ones.
No.
But no, yeah. So, and then of course, then you have Sparrow, who's the naive little farm girl who in the big city who's gonna have a reality slap her in the face. And then she's either gonna have to learn to be her own person, or she's just gonna fall back into old patterns, kind of thing. Which that's always hard to break. And then you have Arthur, who's already fallen back into old patterns and who's very much that antisocial, don't touch me, don't look at me type of person.
Part
The
of me
extreme.
really-
Go ahead.
part of me is saying that like it's part of me is saying something is gonna flip, like the script is just gonna flip completely of fucking Arthur is like tries to use his powers, but like he was able to do it for good and prove to everyone that hey, people with dangerous power might be not dangerous, like they're not be dangerous as you think. And then Sparrow just like turns into the villain. That's a part of me that's saying, like, just saying that. But
I can tell you
I
right
don't know.
now that is not how it's going to go at all.
Yeah,
Not
I
at
thought
all.
so. I thought so, but part of me was like, man, that would be a hell of a twist.
I mean, but it'd also be something people will probably see coming to, or would expect at the same time, because that's usually how it goes too.
Yeah,
But no, that's not how I'm going to make it go. And of all honesty, that's what you described is the personification of Shaquilla. She is someone with dangerous powers, but is technically using them for good.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, what you described is like Shaquilla in a nutshell. But it's
Again,
not good. It's not going to be Sparrow and Arthur.
Yeah. Again, I'm like running on like fumes.
Yeah, I don't think you have much room to talk when we have Skull over here.
What?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah. Anything else someone wants to add or ask or comment?
Not from me.
You're just here for the ride. It's okay. What about you, Ruthless? Anything?
Nothing to add. Actually, curious. Would you consider the D&D worlds, world building?
What about it?
No, like, do you think like someone's D&D like D&D world building kind of like a thing that we could talk about or not?
It kind of like falls into this general world building thing. I wouldn't say we would do an episode directly on that alone.
Do it all alone.
Well, I'd say
Yeah.
more like, again, it's just world building in general. Like, it's something that we did touch upon here,
Yeah.
and I feel like that's good enough. To be
Okay.
quite
I just
honest.
had to ask because I was like, part of me was like tempted to say like go on a tangent, but I was like, wait, hold up, I needed to ask first.
Well, it's overall world building because, like, again,
Yeah.
like I said, like if you are making a homebrew campaign and
Yeah.
you want to build your own world, yeah, that's
Yeah.
literally it right there. You're world building. You've got to
Yeah.
build everything. And it's just writing a story. The only difference is with D&D is that you, the DM, aren't the actual storyteller. The storytellers are your players.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, you are the omnipotent force that can tell them what they need to know, but they are the ones writing their own stories, just within your world.
Yeah, pretty much. And they
Yeah.
also kind of like, you could also, as a DM, just have like, kind of literally give the materials, or even literally give the tools to X plot point or X point that they're
Right. But it's
trying to
also
do.
up to the players to decide if that's where they want to go.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Because, like, I can nudge and everything, but I can't directly tell you go here, go there.
Yeah.
That is for you guys to decide. Because if I
Yeah.
start doing that, that would remove your agency, and that is a
Yeah.
no-no.
That is 100% so true.
It's like that's also what the DM is for anyone who's ever interested. For those that don't care, being a DM is both the easiest and the hardest job because you have to be creative enough. You have to be good at improv, very good at improv.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And you cannot be a control freak. Like, I think that's probably one of the biggest things you have to remember is that if you are the DM, you have to let your players decide what they want to do because it is their story, not yours. Even though it's your world, technically, they are the storytellers. They decide what's going to happen, how they're going to do it, and you just kind of have to sit back and let them do it for the most part. Obviously, there are exceptions and here and there, but like for the most part, you kind of just let them do what they want.
Basically, you're God.
You know, that's kind of sad.
It is, but let's be honest, it's kind of true. I'm going to hell if there is a hell, aren't I?
I think we're all joining you on that, Raptor. Don't worry. If it's true what they say that gays go to hell, then we're all going with you.
Yeah.
What?
Oh my gosh. That was great. Oh my gosh.
Oh shit.
Thank you, Skull. I know you weren't paying attention, but that was perfect. Oh my gosh. Yep, there we go. All right. Anything else?
Lost.
Hey. That's fine. It's okay, Skull. This wasn't the best episode for you. This is probably more of an episode geared towards you and I, but like you kind of just took a backseat to all of it.
I mean, we still got a
Yeah.
good bit into this episode, though.
I know. But would you guys be okay?
Sitting down to record after not sleeping for more than 30
Yeah,
hours.
well, here's the thing, sweetheart. That's your own fault.
I didn't mean to not sleep.
Yeah, there's many ways you can try to fall asleep, honey. Like,
Tried.
try
I
harder.
tried, and then my brain was like, draw, so I did art. It wasn't good art. Really
Oh my
bad,
gosh.
but I'm not sharing it.
Okay, you need to find a way to shut off your brain. Like, once you figure out how to shut off your brain, you're gonna be golden. But anyway, I think that's a good place to end. What about you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured from you.
Well, no. I'm just it's right now getting really late, like pretty late.
Oh
for
yeah,
me.
it is late for you.
Yeah. Isn't it like 9 over for you?
Yeah, but I've got more writing to do, and I haven't eaten Dandy's food, so I'm not tired. That man can cook. Holy fuck! Like he put me to sleep with his food. But no, yeah, I'm wide awake. So no, yeah, I think that's a good place to end.
All right. Then I guess we'll wrap up the episode because it's late as fuck.
Can
Have
I
a
go
good
back
morning,
to
night. fuck. I can't say it right.
Have a wonderful night, morning, evening, day, whatever it is, wherever you're at.
Yeah, whatever the case, whatever the fuck, and we will catch you
Shut
guys
up.
later.